As I'm sure you are all aware, our special guest today is Greg Epstein, the humanist chaplain at Harvard and MIT, and author of the amazing new book, which I really enjoyed. You can see it all on myself. The book is Tech Agnostic: How Technology Became the World's Most Powerful Religion and Why It Desperately Needs a Reformation. We'll be talking to Greg in just a moment, but let me tell you a little bit about what we have planned for today. We'll just move those slides forward. I have want to make sure you know that we're going to be chatting throughout. Make sure you've got your chat set to everybody and not just the panelists or not just the hosts. And feel free to share your thoughts throughout the conversation and chat. And then we're going to be taking your questions throughout in the formal Q&A function. So look for that little Q&A button at the bottom of your Zoom screen. About halfway through, we'll switch from me asking all the questions to you asking all the questions. So anytime a question comes up, start adding it, and we'll have lots of time for your thoughts and reactions. We are going to record this webinar, and that will be available on IFTF's website. If you find it so interesting, you want to share it with some of your friends and colleagues. If you are just joining us for the first IFTF Foresight talk that you have ever attended, let me tell you a little bit about IFTF. We are an independent public interest organization. We were founded in 1968. We're based in Silicon Valley, and our mission is to help organizations and leaders become future ready. We provide practical tools, research, and programs that turn foresight into the critical new insights that ultimately lead to transformative action. And in addition to these free public Foresight talks, there are lots of ways you can get involved in learning with us. For example, we do a Foresight Essentials training program. We have a specialization on Coursera. If you're interested in this, you can check out the chat. Our producer Aisha will drop some links in chat so you can find out about the learning opportunities. And in addition to that, let's just show you what we have coming up. Here are some of the upcoming trainings we have in 2024 and 2025. Some are in person in the Bay Area, some are live online. We do them in different time zones, so depending on where you are in the world, there'll be a training that works for you. We have some special trainings for folks working in the field of philanthropy. We have a series of sold out trainings on the 3 horizons of AI that we've added some new ones that you may want to join us for. And then I teach IFTF Fast Futures Foresight for Beginners, which is our super fun, interactive, fast-paced 90 minutes of essential habits and games that you can play to increase your foresight. That's a great one to invite people to if they've never done any foresight training before. What else do we want you to know? If you are an organization that would like to partner with IFTF, we have a program called IFTF Vantage, where we help build future readiness at scale across your entire organization. There's a little link that I'm just going to drop in chat if you'd like to learn more about leveling up an entire organization with foresight. We're excited to be here with you today with our amazing guest speaker. Let me tell you a little bit about Greg. Give you the formal biography. Okay. So Greg Epstein serves as a humanist chaplain at Harvard and MIT and convener for ethical life at MIT's Office of Religious, Spiritual, and Ethical Life. He was TechCrunch's first ethicist in residence. He is the author of Good Without God, which is also an amazing book. He's written for MIT Technology Review, CNN.com, the Boston Globe, the Washington Post, Newsweek, and he is here with this really important and timely book. Before we dive in, just so you don't have to just take my words for it, here's some words that have been shared by some fellow researchers and experts in the field. Many of you know IFTF collaborator Doug Rushkoff. Here's what he has to say about this book. He says it makes the best case yet for why we have to withhold our faith from technology before its values become the given circumstances of our reality. Just because you're not programming these intelligences doesn't mean they're not programming you. There's still time to retrieve and celebrate our shared humanity together. This book points the way. And we're going to be pointing the way, hopefully, to a better future with Greg today. Let's welcome Greg. Hello. Where are you joining from us in the world today, Greg?
Hi, Jane. It's great to finally get to talk to you. I feel like I've been, talking with you in your community on Twitter and, Twitter, of course, RIP for many years now, but great to be with you. I am here in an office at the headquarters of the American Humanist Association in Washington, D.C. Just got in this morning. Good Tech Agnostic came out yesterday, and we did my first live book events yesterday, and then tonight I'm doing Politics and Prose in DC. And here I am with you. So thank you to the American Humanist Association for having me. Great organization.
Yes, and happy book birthday. That is a cause for celebration. So this is you're at a humanist headquarters. You are a humanist chaplain. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means before we dive into some of the big ideas of your book?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a humanist chaplain. I have been the humanist chaplain at Harvard for, well, this is my 20th year now. Amazing how time flies. And I'm a chaplain for the non-religious. Chaplains are typically religious advisors, so it's a unique role. Going back, it dates back to Christianity. But in university settings, hospitals, prisons, et cetera, military, of course, there are chaplains there to help people, what we call at Harvard Divinity School, make meaning, find a purpose in life through difficult times, or simply, figure out who you are, who you want to be, how you want to live. And the humanist chaplaincy at Harvard was founded 50 years ago as the first ever humanist chaplaincy at any university or college in the world, and the first in North America of its kind, and of any kind, of humanist chaplaincy. And I'm there 20 years now, and I love the work. I work with religious colleagues all the time. But from this very specific atheistic, humanistic, non-religious perspective.
Well, you may not know this, Greg, but you actually were a signal of change for our researchers at the Institute of the Future when you first started doing this work. As futurists, we look for clues to how the future might be different, sort of like real things happening, but they're surprising and they're a little bit weird. They make you say, like, what's going on over there? And when you first started doing this work, we considered it a signal of a possible future where traditional formal religion might not meet the spiritual needs of younger generations. And we were interested in exploring what might take on that role of helping people organize in community and make sense of their suffering and give a sense like ritual and structure to their daily lives. And your work as a humanist chaplain is one sort of future force, creating an alternative to traditional religion. But as you have so astutely observed in your new book, another future force has come along to provide an alternative to traditional organized religion, which is technology. And that's really the central argument of this book, is that technology has replaced organized religion as an organizing factor.
Yeah, it turns out, I think, that being a humanist chaplain is a pretty interesting and certainly unique, but I think relevant perch from which to observe the development of tech, because the book is not an anti-tech book, right? I'm not saying that I have a problem with using technology at all. And I can't even imagine what such a book would look like. But what I am saying is that the ways in which we are using technology, or perhaps as Doug Rushkoff says there, love that blurb that he wrote for me, the ways that it's using us, really look a lot like religion now. And I'm not even saying that to say that, therefore it's disqualifiable, or, that, all religion is bad. And so if it looks like religion, then we have to get rid of it, and become total anti-tech people again. No. But we all know, even for those of us who happen to be deeply religious believers, and, if that's you, I honor you. I have no problem with you. I'm not asking in any way for you to change your belief. And there's probably a lot that I can learn from you. But we all know, even deep believers, that there are lots of religions out there, and not all of them are great for humanity. Not all of them are, have equal amounts of integrity and the ability to self-criticize. And so, the problem is that the tech often ends up looking to me like one of the other kinds of religions, the kinds that really do lack in perspective and self-criticism and the ability to do critical thinking, even though we're presented with a world of tech that sort of self-understands as like, yes, we're incredibly rational, we're incredibly secular, we're incredibly smart, and we're a bunch of geniuses and we can kind of do no wrong. Every invention that we come up with is going to be better than the next. And it's just, sometimes that ends up being true, but sometimes it ends up being more than myth. I think religion is the better model for what that amounts.
Well, one thing that I like about what you do in this book is you say it's sort of a metaphor. We're sort of using religion as a metaphor to understand how we relate to technology, but it's more than a metaphor, because there's a history in religion of reformation. And if we acknowledge the way that we are relating to technology as a sort of religious engagement, that actually gives us tools for reforming technology itself, to better serve our values and make more meaning. So we're going to get, that's sort of like the happy ending. That's sort of like the plot twist in the back half of the book, where it's like, oh, this is very problematic, but wait, it's problematic, but it's also a path forward. You structure the book in these three parts. So maybe we can kind of walk through and give folks and a few like examples of how this is kind of a metaphor, but not just a metaphor. So it's first the beliefs we have about technology have a kind of religious aspect to them. And then it's the practices. It's like our rituals, our habits have this religious quality to them. And then finally, the beloved community, or the Reformation. Who are the apostates? Who are the heretics? What kind of congregation should we be building when we're not, turning away totally from technology, but we're creating a movement that we would actually want to be a part of. So should we start with beliefs?
Sure. Yeah.
What are the big beliefs of technology, the religion?
All right. So I started with beliefs of this religion, and just in case people want a little bit more context, I'll throw in that this sort of came about after about 15 years almost of my career as a chaplain at Harvard, and I'd been building a congregation. I was invited to join MIT as well as a humanist chaplain. I'd been sort of invited to do something a little bit similar to that a few years earlier, and turned it down. But then in 2018, it was like the idea of tech really struck me. And tech, and the idea that actually this is a little bit religious. And so, moving to, the beliefs, I'll say first is theology. Religions have theologies, which means the, basic big narratives, big beliefs, that, around which the rest of the religious tradition may be structured. And so the theology of the tech religion, the theological symbol is, you've got your cross for Christianity, right? Your Star of David, your crescent, your wheel of Dharma. And in the tech religion, it's the hockey-shaped graph. It's, the idea of infinite increase, exponential increase in profits, in greatness, in achievement, in excellence. And all of that is guided, by the Christianity has
Here's
the
a kind of example.
yeah, there you go. All of that is guided, in Christianity, you've got the Holy Trinity, right? So you've got different aspects of God. Well, the hockey stick graph is guided by the invisible hand of the market. And that is, as religious of a symbol as you can get. And there you would stop me naturally and say, yeah, okay, Greg, I think I'm anticipating where you're going to go with, some of these other beliefs and things that, I could see how maybe tech could look like religion, but aren't you really talking about capitalism? And yeah, I am. I mean, for sure, capitalism has looked like a religion for a long time. The issue here is that a specific sect of capitalism came along, starting around the 80s and 90s, the late 80s and early 90s, and ate the rest of capitalism. Right? There is no longer any form of capitalism at any meaningful scale in the world today that is not a tech capitalism. Even finance itself got eaten by tech. I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, well, maybe basket weaving, and the person happened to know something about basket weaving and said, no, even basket weaving is actually taken over by tech now. And so, that's the thing, right? Is that I start the book with the story of Constantine, the Holy Roman Emperor, because Christianity was just a little, Mediterranean cult until the early 4th century when Constantine takes over in this kind of family drama filled way. It could have been a reality TV show. And he converts the Holy Roman Empire to Christianity, and then all of a sudden, because his God, he said, had more operating power. That the translation was actually cooperating power from 150 years ago. But this new God has more operating power for Constantine, and now Christianity is taking over the world from that point forward, right? So that's the thing, is like this little piece of capitalism is now the whole thing of capitalism, and it looks a lot like a religion. So it's got those sort of big symbols. And then it's got what I would call doctrinal beliefs as well. So, I walk people through sort of like 10 basic doctrinal beliefs in the book, with an 11th thrown in as a bonus round, I guess. But the idea of charity is a doctrinal concept in basically every one of the world's religions, and philanthropy is so central to the mythology of tech as the savior of humanity. And so, for example, I'd like to talk about Jeff Bezos, who's you might have noticed him in the news lately. I was told by one of his former employees who was fired illegally for climate activism against her own company, a senior person there for a long time, that Bezos sees himself as, quote, the savior of humanity. And so for example, I start with this bit where he's going to give 10 billion for climate change, but and it seems like this messianic gesture, but it's 8% of his net worth. And he's going to give $100 million to climate answers, to developing AI climate answers. When, for example, I just talked to my friend Leah Stokes, one of the leading climate policy scientists in the world, the other day about this, and she was saying, like, Greg, especially in 2024, we have the answers. We're just not doing anything about them. The idea that we're gonna rely on some magic AI solution is farcical, but that's the religious practice, is to rely on such things. There are ideas like heaven and hell, and I might even read you a fun bit from the hell piece of it.
Yes, do. And I think if I can just sort of echo what you're saying, the idea that the technology itself will save us, so we don't need social reform, social action, policy, and that the technology will fix, the economic inequalities, or will fix the carbon crisis, so that other kinds of change, like technological change, is the only path towards a better world or salvation. That really resonates with me as a reader of the book and as a futurist. People often think futurists are techno optimists, and we're just going to, like, let's just look for the best new technologies that offer the most promising, exponential change. But I always say I'm a social optimist. Like, I believe that we can come up with better ways to organize society, propose new policies, adopt new traditions and rituals. And I think what you're pointing out is that part of the problem with treating technology as a religion, where we're only going to solve problems technologically, it sort of devalues all these other forms of social change and social action and
I
policy.
love that, Jane. I mean, I really do, and it's why I'm happy to be talking with you. It's this idea that, yeah, the only form of change that's meaningful, according to this myth, that, by the way, really better to look at it as a religion than a myth, because, if I told you that this myth was taking over the country, and that Achilles and Zeus were trying to get us to behave in a certain way, you'd sort of like laugh at that, right? Like, yeah, whatever, man. But if I told you that a new religion had emerged and it was, garnering billions of followers, and they had a very specific agenda and they were pushing public policy around it, like, on that you'd worry, because that that's absolutely happening, it has happened, and it probably is going to continue to happen. And so that's the reason why this isn't just a myth, it's really more aptly a religion. And so, I just wanted to read you this couple paragraphs to give you a sense of what I mean when I say that there's a doctrine to this. So there is a very influential sort of AI philosopher named Nick Bostrom, who, millions and millions of views on multiple TED Talks, and, having a whole sort of set of scholars and conversations around his work at Oxford, until finally he was kicked out of Oxford because, it became clear that for a 20 plus year career, he'd been behaving unethically in a number of ways. But I'll set that aside for a second, and I'll say he's got this 2008 a 2008 essay called "Letter from Utopia," which is written in the form of an epistle, or a biblical genre of letters meant to spread the gospel, but it's an epistle from the future. So the residents of a potential long-termist utopia. I figured this is appropriate for you and your institute, right? The residents of a potential long-termist utopia send a letter back in time to plead with the people of our age. Help us come into existence. Join us. Or, as Bostrom's critic, Emil Torres, puts it, Bostrom writes that by modifying our bodies and brains with technology, we can create a techno-utopian world filled with endless pleasures. I'll just go on a bit here. Even constant showering of what we mere mortals might today consider the best type of pulsing ecstasy. These are quotes. Our hearts and minds might be capable of now. And so, we're going to get to this digital utopia. And he even writes on page 81 of my book, heaven, yes, the letter writer tells us from the future, I didn't realize it could be like this. And Bostrom is one of many who have epistles like this, and there's lots of them in his canon, and people pay deep, deep attention to them and invest billions of dollars according to his visions. Some of these visions in essays like this one are directly reflected in the writings and the investments of somebody like a Marc Andreessen, the billionaire, multi-billionaire venture capitalist who's been behind a lot of the biggest, social media and AI companies. Sounds like that, and then carries it out into the world and into policy spaces.
Yeah, well, this is like what's so interesting about how you do your research. I mean, you do so much textual analysis, like almost like a biblical scholar, like doing the deep readings and these surprising readings, right, of scripture. And you're sort of showing us, wait, if you want to understand how technology has become like a religion, let me show you the scripture that is influencing us. So that's, and we've so much to cover. I want to move us along. So that's sort of like the top down, the doctrine.
There's tons of more examples that I could give from section 1, but I just wanted to give your audience a taste of how similar something like this is to sort of like a perversion of what you are trying to achieve with your work.
Oh, well, yes. And that is a constant dilemma for the field of foresight is, how do we avoid having such certainty about what will make a better future and how to get there. We need to stay agnostic, which is where you're going to take us. So here, I'm going to set it up for you, and then you can decide how best to tackle it. So the top down is the kind of the doctrine and the beliefs. And then we have the sort of bottom-up experience of being participants in this religious, community, whether we see it ourselves as followers or not, which are sort of the habits and the rituals. So I want to get you, share like, a thought or two about how we participate in this. And then we'll get to the idea of agnosticism, which is really, your guidance to us about as new technologies come into our organizations, come into our homes, come into our communities, what does it mean to be agnostic? What is this way of facing the future as it unfolds, and finding that right humanistic middle ground? So give us a little beliefs, and then we'll get into the sort of practicalities of being. Sure. How do we practice tech agnosticism?
Yeah, so the practices of the tech religion. I wanted to, just let people know that there's some really deep dive stories about this in the book, because first of all, as a chaplain, I'm very emphatic about the fact that religion is not just about what we believe, it's about what we do. If religion were only our beliefs and it had nothing to do with our actions, A, it wouldn't cause the problems that it does, and B, it wouldn't have the power and the positive power that it does too. So, as I was mapping out for myself in my head, starting in 2018, okay, this really does seem comparable to religion. It has those, the sort of doctrinal things that I was mentioning. It even has the idea of gods, which we may or may not have time for today, but I promise you there are lots of gods in the tech religion, and they're all detailed in here. What are the practices? So first of all, it has hierarchies, right? I thought about entitling a chapter after the concept of castes. But, I felt like that might be actually taking it a bit too far. If you think like I'm just kind of maximalist with my big metaphor here, and I'm just doing this for laughs, like, no, I mean, sometimes I do think it's laughable, but I'm not playing it for laughs necessarily. Like, I thought about caste, and I thought, okay, India has a caste system. And then the wonderful American writer Isabel Wilkerson writes about caste in American racism. And I was reading her book and really thinking, okay, she's making a great case for the fact that there have been very few caste systems in the world and its history. And I didn't want to try to portray this as one, but all religions have hierarchies, like in the way that if you're an Orthodox Jew, and you're male, you're supposed to wake up in the morning, and one of the very first things you do before you do anything with your day is you say a set of prayers that includes thanking God for not making you a woman. Okay, you can imagine all kinds of religions have practices like this, hierarchical practices. So I tell the story at the beginning of the hierarchies chapter where I'm at a house in San Francisco of a venture capitalist friend of mine, somebody who had donated a significant amount of money to my chaplaincy, my congregational organization. We'd had a chaplaincy at Harvard. He wanted to start one at Yale, and he was a friend. And I explained to him why I'm no longer doing that work, as he's sort of busily doing stuff around his house in Silicon Valley. And then, I give him the elevator pitch, and he says to me, yeah, I get it. Interesting. But, I don't know if tech is really like religion. I mean, religion has hierarchies. And to his credit, he let me put this story in the book because, he's a good guy who doesn't look so good when he makes that comment. But, the hierarchies of race and gender are really pronounced. I got, sum it up at one point, like not only are 95% of venture capitalists either white or Asian, not only are 40% educated at either Harvard or Stanford or both, but the numbers get even worse. 93% of VC dollars controlled by white men. These are numbers that I'm reading from a few years ago now at this point, but it's not like it's changed that dramatically. And so, but other practices as well, like I explore the idea of tech addiction because it just strikes me again and again how we constantly genuflect before our stained glass black mirror altars, and we really look like we're praying when we do. And that's a tech practice. Yeah, lots more to say.
You so many places to go with this, but I'm just reminded of one of my favorite things that you wrote. And now I want to let's see if I can pull that up. Because so we're engaged in these practices. We sort of reinforce the hierarchies. We have our own sort of addiction or like pathological behaviors that we get caught up in. And you're trying to move us to this more form of agnosticism instead of just blindly following the doctrine. And one of the things you say, and I'll tell you why I love it. Well, you probably know why I love it. You say the tech apocalypse is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. Yeah. We need to start acting like the worst could happen to us unless we work for equity and think about how all might benefit from doing so. Now, that's great because, for futurists, it's like almost like a rite of passage to put in a talk the William Gibson quote, "The future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed." And I love your pointed take on that. The tech apocalypse is already here. It's just unevenly distributed. We need to start acting like, even if we're in a safe part of the hierarchy, we should still act as if the worst could happen to us. And I thought I'd take us here because this kind of speaks to where you do spend a good part of the book giving some wise encouragement or advice for how we might become a bit of a skeptic or a heretic or a reformer. And maybe you could just share some thoughts about what does it mean to be tech agnostic and how can we bring that, to our lives, our families, our organizations?
Yeah. Thank you, Jean. Really appreciate the question and the thought that you put into it. And yeah, I mean, the book, it's very pointed criticism of the bad kind of religion in tech, as I would see fit to critique the bad kind of religion, traditional religion, right? But somewhere between a third and a half of the book is the positive alternative, because I'm not sure if that's immediately clear to somebody who's getting the critique part of it, but where do you go from there, right? And so the idea for me is, yeah, I'm non-religious, right? But I'm not against all religion. I recognize that it has this value for people, that there are aspects of it that even have value for me as a non-religious person. What I really just want is reformed religion. I like the kind of religion where Christians know how to critique Christianity. They know that their own tradition is not perfect. It's got plenty of flaws, and they're happy to talk about that. That's really admirable to me. You see the same in certain corners of religious Judaism, or even of the part of religious Judaism that comes along with loving the state of Israel. There are people that are able to be really self-critical about Israel and recognize it's not perfect and it's making mistakes right now. And I love those people. And I love going to Israel and talking to those people. Even I lived in Jerusalem with many of them for quite a while. There are people like that in Islam and Buddhism. And by the way, even Buddhism has plenty of flaws and people who are willing to critique them from within. So can tech be more like that? Can we have tech people who, when a Nick Bostrom starts arguing about basically a heaven, recognize, tech people from within recognizing what I would point out, which is that, the reason we talk about heaven in all these religious traditions, some people have a sincere belief that there's going to be this better world in the next world. I get that. But it's also very often a classic move by the autocratic leader to say, oh, I know I'm not doing a very good job in this world. I know I'm not providing you with safety or justice or, a quality of life or, human rights, dignity, whatever. But I've got the perfect next world for you, and you have to follow me to get there. And if you don't follow me, you go to the other place. And, that's where the doctrine is really problematic, right? So,
And by the way, it's definitely happening with AI right now. I'm seeing a lot of chat comments. People are like, wow, yeah, this is like becomes especially important with AI. So the messaging we're getting now
yes,
is,
I mean, Sam Altman is going around basically saying, if you don't give me several $1 trillion and give them to me right away, and we all know like why he needs the several $1 trillion right away, because OpenAI is a furnace for cash. It just burns it up right away. And it goes straight into the air and creates more greenhouse effect, his cash, literally. And he needs it or the place is going to tank, right? But then in order to get it, he can't tell us that. He can't say that because that's not a good reason. And then they will crash. And then Sam Altman won't be the big genius that he sees himself as or wants to see himself as, right? So instead, we get the mythology. One, that OpenAI is going to be, it's going to lead us to an AI heaven. And B, or that if you don't do it, that the unaligned AI will win, and that is the AI that takes us to hell, right? Where
yes,
that's where the AI scientists have said, according to the effective altruist movement and others, that there's this 10% chance that unaligned AI will wipe out all of humanity in the coming century, making it the worst problem that we face, the most serious situation that humanity faces. Forget climate change, forget nuclear, forget war, forget racism, forget sexism, anything. No, this is the thing you have to pay attention to. And by the way, please give me your trillions, right? So,
and can I just like underscore that this is a fascinating turn in technology culture, how much apocalyptic visions are
yes.
becoming central to the work that people are asked to do. I mean,
It has to, yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's not, we're used to the utopian vision being presented and the millennium comes and everything is perfect. But the role of apocalyptic storytelling in the last few years as a fear tactic, I mean, that is new and different and worth very much.
Any religion, Jane, that has any ambition is going to have some kind of apocalyptic vision. Why? Because you can't say, well, if you don't follow me, things will get really, really bad tomorrow, because it's not going to happen. People will wake up and they'll say like, you said it and it didn't happen, so now what? I want my money back. So what you do is you project it into the deep future, and you say like, no, you'll see, like, even though it's not happening right now, in the distant future, the most unimaginable things will happen, and you have to follow me, or the good, in order for the good things to happen and not the bad things, right? And it's just a classic move that the AI people are following. Now, I promised you, that I would respond to your question about the positive alternative, but the good news is that in critiquing the tech this way, I actually am embodying the positive alternative, or the first part of the positive alternative, which is the heretics, the apostates, and ultimately the Cassandras. Cassandras are usually women, after the mythological character of Cassandra, who sort of cry foul about the harms of the world that are not paid attention to, and they're often ignored, right?
Oh, trust me, as futurists, we know all about that.
Yeah.
We're with you on that. We got a
Yeah.
lot of Cassandras to join your tech
Exactly.
adoption.
And so, the idea is, and one of the things that I dove deepest into in my 6 years of researching this book and 200 interviews with people from every walk of life in Silicon Valley, from you know, from the founders, the CEOs, the venture capitalists, to the social workers and the therapists and the clergy people and the Uber and Lyft drivers and the labor activists, et cetera. One of the groups of people that I so enjoyed deep diving into were these groups that I would characterize as apostates and heretics, or Cassandras, where they're within the world of tech. They're super knowledgeable about tech. The person whose story ends up being central to that chapter is an incredibly brave woman named Vina Dubal, who is a legal scholar and anthropologist in the University of California system, who took on Uber and Lyft, and has paid an incredible price for it. And you know, she gave me such extraordinary access to her life to tell this story. I would beg you to read it, because she's so inspiring. And at one point, I'm sitting on the phone with her, and I'm really worrying with her that there, you know, is it somehow possible that her brother was murdered because of her activism against Uber and Lyft? And it turns out that that's probably not the case. But, you know, it wasn't just me that was worried about that. Her dad had at one point suspected that too. And it's just, you know, I hesitate to even talk about it, but she enthusiastically granted me permission to write about it. And I just hope people will read her story and about some of the other heretics and apostates. But then,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead. Well, I was just saying, I want to make sure we get to some of the questions, and we got some
yeah,
juicy provocations and questions in chat, and
go for it.
maybe something fun to do also at the end. So continuing on this like thought of how do we become tech agnostics or embody these ideas, especially if we don't work in technology ourselves, right? So Daniel Kim asks, in this age of religious technologism, how does one train to become a humanist chaplain and minister for tech agnosticism for those of us watching this webinar who feel called to join this work? I mean, what would you recommend if somebody's called to join the work of tech agnosticism? What do we do besides read the book? What do we do?
I mean, it's fascinating, you know, that's where people are taking it. You know, I would say, I mean, being a chaplain is not necessarily something that you know, that you want to try to spend a lot of your energy to do, in the sense that it's, you know, chaplaincy in general and humanist chaplaincy in particular, it's not like a, you know, big lucrative career or anything. It's for the people who I would say are most passionate about thinking and talking about this, you know, all around the clock, which, you know, I just happen to be. But, you know, I will say though that, you know, these apostates and heretics that I'm talking about, or the humanist, alternative practitioners that I talk to as well, you know, in the sense that like I'm using humanism as part of the metaphor of tech as religion, as well, because what I'm saying is like, my job, and there's not that many people that have a job like mine, but there are some now. My job is to be like a religious leader, but not exactly a religious leader, to have a different set of beliefs, you know, set of beliefs that's more humanistic, that's more centered on the idea that we create religion, it doesn't create us. And you know, that we're trying to do something positive for all of humanity. And there are the equivalent of that in the tech religion as well. People who are sort of on the periphery of tech, you know, or they may be really within tech, as engineers, as scientists, as data people, whatever, but they're trying to create alternatives to the mainstream tech religion narrative. They're trying to figure out what it would look like to create tech that maybe it's not the most profitable thing in the world. Maybe it's not the fastest solution to whatever human problem we're talking about, you know, today, but maybe something more sustainable, maybe something more hopeful, more inspiring, you know, the kind of thing that in the longer term future we might want to see more of. And you know, I got a chance to meet with a lot of people along those lines and tell, again, some really fascinating stories in the book about their lives and their work. And so, you know, you don't have to become a humanist chaplain professionally. You know, you can, from wherever your interest in tech lies. And by the way, even if you're not a tech professional, we're all kind of believers in this tech religion, right? It's sort of forced upon us. It's like one of the ancient religions. Nowadays, you know, you get choice about your religion, right? Like a little rosary here, a little Kabbalah string there, a little Buddhist meditation. But back in the old days, you didn't get a choice. You know, you were assigned your religion based on where you lived and what God was over your head, and that was it. And that's kind of how the tech religion works, right? So wherever you are in this world, you can work on creating alternatives for yourself. I talked to a student the other day who like doesn't really want to adopt the latest tech, but she likes some tech. So she, you know, she's really proud of her Zune, you know, and her little like writing tablet that all she can do on it is write and you know, record her files. And like that makes a difference to her. Or fighting for justice and holding tech companies accountable, not just unsubscribing from the Washington Post when Jeff Bezos does something ridiculous, but maybe, you know, being active against Amazon itself. And finding other ways to buy the stuff that we buy, or taking collective action and, you know, supporting labor activists and labor organizing. These are all ways that you can be a tech humanist, a tech agnostic.
Well, I think that's one of the most powerful takeaways that I took from this book, Greg, is that, as you say, we can't opt out of this religion if we want to be functioning members of society. There's virtually no job we can have that allows us to opt out of technology, no school we can send our children to that will allow them to completely opt out of technology, no social relations, you know, that we can have. And I think that what you're saying, and tell me if I'm, you know, representing this accurately, is that tech agnosticism is really the only powerful position we can take. Either we can follow blindly because we're immersed in it, we're born into it, but we cannot be we can't be tech atheists. It's impossible. There is no human existence on Earth that will allow us to refuse and totally refute technology as a way of life. So agnosticism is a way of finding our power in this, you know, ecosystem.
And we don't need to. I mean, you know, we don't need to be the first generation in history to say like we don't want tools. There's nothing wrong with tools, right? It's just when we become the tools of the tools, that's the issue, right? And you know, I'm not pulling that out of thin air, right? We're all familiar with the idea that you know, for example, Facebook, you know, we got this sense after a while that we're the product, right? And so, you know, that's the idea. So anyway, the agnostic frame here. I talk a little bit about this wonderful author, Leslie Hazelton, who wrote a book called Agnostic: A Spirited Manifesto. And I talk about her towards the end of the book. You know, she writes, I stand tall in my agnosticism because the essence of it is not merely not knowing, but something far more challenging and infinitely more intriguing, the magnificent oxymoron inherent in the concept of unknowability. At its best, agnosticism goes further. It takes a spirited delight in not knowing. And I guess what I'm getting at there, I love the poetry of her lines, and you know, it really spoke to me. But what I'm getting at there is yes, there will be some tech that really does advance our lives, that really does make for a better world. But then we have to be very cognizant of the part that doesn't. And, you know, rather than this idea that, you know, let's just have faith in everything that comes along. And, you know, if we mess up, oops, you know, we'll move fast and, you know, we're going to break some things. Rather than that, I'd like to see more self-critique, more humility, more of the sense of, I don't know which forms of technology are going to genuinely benefit humanity and which ones aren't. But I'm willing to wait because you know, there's a real tragedy in, in sort of ruining people's lives, for the sake of what, of new shit, as the writer Anand Giridharadas described it to me at one point. Like it's nice to have new shit, but are we really willing to put millions, if not billions of lives at risk, essentially for new shit, when, in order to motivate ourselves to do that, we need to create this big myth of how important it all is. Like, do we need these chatbots that badly? I mean,
Ooh,
they've messed
well,
they've messed
yeah.
up Google, right? Like I used to love Google, right?
Terrible.
Now you go on Google, it's just a bunch of nonsense. And you think like Apple will present itself as having a better alternative, but
Well, because I want to we're going to put this to the test in a minute. Do
let's
we
do it.
really need these chatbots? We're going to test that a little bit. We're going to practice being tech agnostics together, right?
Okay.
Before I do that, I want to reflect back that quote. So the spirited delight in not knowing. I like that you say that, because being a tech agnostic can be joyful, I think. This is an exciting time for humanity. And we're not talking about being Luddites. We're talking about joyfully, in that sense of the type of religion and spirit that one can find, the type of spirit and community and communion one can find in religion. We can joyfully participate in deciding, of not knowing, but discovering what
100%.
the
I mean,
technology.
I see this as a really joyful, hopeful book. And people will say to me, maybe because they're only halfway through or whatever, they'll say it's kind of like a horror story, like, oh, this is such a cautionary tale. Like I got chills when I was reading this or that part. And it's like, yes, but if you read to the end, you'll be inspired by the people who are taking this new alternative approach, this more agnostic approach to tech. They're really brave, and they blew me away with their courage, with their innovativeness, actually.
Well, we're going to be brave right now.
All right.
You've agreed to be brave. So as some of the folks attending today know, we have a chatbot that we've created to help us imagine futures we want. And so since you're not an atheist, you're an agnostic, I thought,
That's true. I'm open to the possibility of some chatbots being useful in certain ways.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to put into this chatbot some words from your agnostic manifesto towards the end of the book about the world you'd like to see. And we're going to ask it to describe to us a world we might wake up in. I'm going to share my screen so we can do this together. And we're going to be brave. And hold on, let me make sure I can find before I share my screen, and then I'm not showing you all my private files, because that would be terrible. Okay, here we go. Let me try and share my screen. We're going to open up the Urgent Optimist scenario generator. Okay, so you can read the prompt if you'd like just to yourselves. What I'm going to do is I'm going to type in some of okay, so I'd like to imagine a future where the principles of a tech agnostic movement have shaped society. And then here are the principles. The tech culture of the future should be shaped by tech humanists, spiritual practitioners, and others brave enough to build an alternative. Be a human being first in a tech first world. These are your words, Greg. And recognize you can't do any of this alone. You'll need community to find the humanity in tech. Choose your community in the same agnostic spirit with which you approach the tech religion as a whole. Now, we don't know how it's going to interpret this.
Yeah, does this chatbot have a track record, Jane? Like has it?
So it's been trained. Well, it's been trained in how to create engaging future scenarios.
Okay.
Let's say that. Okay.
Right.
So
All right.
here's it's gonna, you wake up one morning in 2033 to find that a major tech agnostic social movement has swept across society. Overnight, it seems that people everywhere have embraced a new mindset of being human first in this technology-driven world. The principles of this movement emphasize finding balance, community, and spiritual grounding amidst the abundance of powerful technologies that have come to dominate daily life. There's a newfound appreciation for face-to-face interaction, nature, mindfulness practices, and finding purpose beyond just optimizing productivity and convenience through tech tools. You check your newsfeed and see that major tech companies have appointed chief humanity officers to help steer their products and services back toward enabling more meaningful human experiences and connections. There's a growing backlash against persuasive design, addictive app features, and business models predicated on excessive screen time and data extraction. Universities are revamping curriculum to produce more tech humanist graduates skilled in philosophy, ethics, and designing technologies aligned with human thriving rather than just efficiency or profitability. New zoning laws are reshaping city life by mandating walkable neighborhoods, public green spaces, and limits on virtual workplaces and delivery robots. There's a whole mind-body wellness. And then it asks us, how do we feel in this tech agnostic future? What initial actions would you take to try to adapt, prepare, help yourself, or help others? So I don't know, Greg, what do you think? What's missing from this? What would you train this scenario creator? Is there anything missing here? Would you be happy to wake up in this future, or what would you need for this to be a future you'd want to wake up in?
So my initial reaction, Jane, it's fascinating. I thank you for doing something so fun. Is that I'm even a little bit perturbed, or like a little disturbed, I guess, by the rapidity
Mm,
of the output, right?
mm,
So, for example, I think, it would be understandable for somebody to say like, oh, look at how great this is. It just spits out like without, even an instant, you've got this whole thing. But my reaction is that really a good thing? Like the fact that you're just getting this just jumble of words, and that they happen to be logically correct. They happen to be, like there's a lot of probably interesting and cool ideas in there. But the fact is that there's just nothing about any of that stuff that happens quickly or easily. And it's kind of like that's kind of the point. Like if that's going to
mm,
happen, if any of those things are going to happen, what's missing is how hard fought
mm,
they would need to be, how hard won they would
mm.
need to be, because you just can't spit out like a humanistic culture. You can talk about it, but you can't really build it like in a sort of like, well, yeah, I got it. I got I got a bot to create it. There's just no such thing.
I
And
wait, that's great. This is like a huge insight. Like that you perfectly demonstrated to me the this process of tech agnosticism, because I
you know, I,
like my chatbots and I like how fast they spit things out. But you're right, we can't spit out the social change. We
no,
can't spit out.
what it reminds me of, for example, now I love interfaith work. I've dedicated a good portion of my life to doing interfaith work. There's a lot of interfaith in my book, Good Without God, and then what I'm calling on a lot of religious leaders and colleagues that I admire very much to do with me here is have interfaith dialogues about how tech is taking over not only what I do but what they do, and sometimes it's a big problem. So I love interfaith work. But my teacher Sherwin Wines, or whom my book Good Without God was dedicated, would say like he never really liked getting invited to interfaith banquets. He was also an atheist rabbi, as Time magazine described him in the 60s. And he would say, what I don't like about these interfaith banquets, which were the big way that people got together as interfaith back then, is like you'd get like the minister would come up, the priest would come up, the Buddhist, monk would come up, the rabbi, etc. And they would all just tell you their platitude, like, oh, hello, yes, I'm a priest, and this is my platitude. Oh, I'm a rabbi, and this is my platitude. Oh, I'm a Hindu Swami, and this is my platitude. And everybody would applaud. And of course, it didn't make a damn bit of difference. And that to me is the kind of wisdom, quote unquote, that you get from that sort of chatbot response. It's like, yeah, okay, everybody knows that, what we'd like to fight for if we want a more humanistic approach in the future is, some of the things that were mentioned in that document. I hesitate to even call it a document. I think that that's sort of giving it a little too much credit, or giving the output of a chatbot a little too much credit. But it's completely missing the blood, the sweat, the tears, so to speak, the humanity that would be involved. Like, what would it take to get to a world that actually has that? It's so difficult to imagine. It would be such an improbable story. I'm a baseball fan, and I'm hoping my Yankees can somehow pull off 3 more wins in a row, but like, I don't even know what that would take. Sorry, now everybody's just like completely leaving the chat. But it might happen, and that's the same with this. It doesn't tell you anything about how that would occur.
I love that. And as a foresight practitioner, we often describe our preferred futures, and then we work backwards to understand we have a decade. What is the blood, sweat, and tears that will be required to actually get there? It's not just the secret where we envision it and then we get to wake up in it, right? So I think you've left us on a perfect point, especially when the most central technology shaping the technology religion right now is AI, and is our experience of instant, spit out solutions, spit out communication, spit out ideas. You're encouraging us as tech agnostics to always meet that instant gratification with appreciation and wonder and curiosity about the blood, sweat, and tears that will still be required, even in an age of AI. I love that. I thank you so much for bringing these ideas to us. I want to thank the community that gathered here today, and encourage you to get your own copy of Tech Agnostic. And I'm going to ask Aisha to bring up a slide letting us know who's going to be joining us for the next IFTF Foresight Talks. And that will be Deborah France, who is the founder of Fostering Innovation, who will be giving us some very practical, real world ideas for how to use futures thinking to refine strategy and develop leaders within our organizations. That's coming up on Thursday, November 21st. And I hope you will join us for that. Greg, thank you so much for challenging us and telling us these amazing stories and helping us have that, I felt, of an aha moment listening to you today.
It's a pleasure, Jane. It's a pleasure to be with you and your community. I feel like I'm in a congregational setting with you, where you're clergy too, and the people in your pews are amazing people. So thanks for the opportunity.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Well, everybody have a great rest of your day. We'll see you for more futuring in the future. Bye, everyone.